Before we get into today's episode, I've created a short questionnaire that will help me get to know you better. Those that fill out the questionnaire will get entered into a draw to win an Amazon gift card. So there's a link in the description for the episode. Click it, fill out the questionnaire, and I look forward to hearing your feedback. Now for today's episode. This is the Michael Brian Show. Hi everyone, welcome back to the show. And I'm joined with Tom Bohne, who's an army veteran and the founder of Kennel to Couch, which is a non-profit for pit bulls and essentially rehomes them and assists them in, I would imagine, becoming family friendly. So, Tom, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me on the show.
I'd be curious about what your life was like in the army, and I just thought I'd start by saying, thanks for your service, and I'm sure you've done a whole lot of good in the world. So, what was it like for you there? And did it have anything to do with why you started the nonprofit?
Yes and no. So I spent 11 and a half years on active duty, had a couple deployments, saw combat in Iraq, and um, experienced a lot of things in Iraq that stay with me for the rest of my life. I didn't do anything in the Army directly related to dogs or dog handling or anything to that effect, but certainly after the Army, dogs have become a big part of almost a therapy component to how I kind of handle mental health and things of that nature. So yeah, definitely they play a role from the things I experienced in the Army, even though there's no direct relation.
Do dogs really help with mental health then? You mentioned that it's a part of potentially your own therapy as well, so to speak. Is it true what they say about pets and animals?
I think it's undisputable at this point. You know, there's so many organizations out there that specialize in training dogs specifically to key into PTSD and anxiety and all of these things. So these therapy animals are a proven technique for dealing with a lot of mental health issues, similar to equine therapy or other animals that we use as part of our healing process, for sure.
What are some of the misconceptions about pit bulls? Because there's a lot of things that we'll probably get wrong when it comes to dogs, but I imagine pit bulls are a bit more, I guess, more understood, I suppose. And what are some of the things that we get wrong?
I think pit bulls are really a product of poor marketing or false marketing over the past few years. I mean, when I was growing up, I think a lot of people would remember that before the 80s, pit bulls were like America's dog. If you looked at Budweiser commercials, you saw Spuds McKenzie. If you saw Our Gang comedy, you saw Spot. They were family dogs, they were this or that. And then in the 80s, there was a lot of police interaction with a lot of the drug pandemics that we had where dogs were being used to guard drug houses. They were uncovering a lot of dog fighting rings. And so there was a lot of publicity surrounding these negative interactions that with these dogs, and it's really stuck with them. Um, you know, if you look at the common beliefs about pit bulls, that they have locking jaws, they have this, that, none of it is actually true. You know, they rank pretty low down on the pressure per square inch on their bite strength. If you look at the temperament tests that the American Kennel Association does, they rank second best of all dog breeds, right under Labrador Retrievers. I think it's Golden Retrievers. 86% of pit bulls pass their temperament tests. So it's really just this cycle of bad marketing that for some reason has been very sticky with them. When I was growing up, pit bulls weren't the bad breed. If you kind of go back, there's a lot of different breeds that have been caught in this negative media cycle. Rottweilers were the evil breed for a while. And before that was Doberman Pinschers, and it didn't really stick with them like pit bulls did. And pit bulls itself is almost like a misnomer. There's about 19 different breeds. That pit bull is an umbrella term that covers about 19 different breeds of dog. And if you go to a shelter, pit bulls are misidentified 70% of the time. Um,
Wow.
you really can't tell if a dog has a pit bull, one of the pit bull breeds in it, just by looking at them. But we only use visual identification in shelters. It's not like they're running them through DNA tests like we do here at home. So a lot of them are misidentified. And then because of that, I think 60% of all dogs euthanized each year are pit bulls. So they really suffer from these biases in an overwhelming way when it comes to euthanization rates and the amount that are put into shelters and things of that nature. So yeah, it's a really tough problem to crack. I don't know that any other breed has really suffered from specific legislation being created to ban them in certain places, or housing regulations when it comes to what breeds you can have. It's always pit bulls, right, that are banned, and it's just such a it's a very ignorant way of thinking. It's not really rooted in any scientific fact or statistic. There's breed specific legislation that pops up and comes up for renewal in different counties all the time. And the amount of people that go to these government council meetings and speak on behalf of the dogs and try to educate the government on where they're going wrong is kind of overwhelming. And when you listen to their arguments, you just think to yourself, how do these laws stay in place? It's just by sheer, it's almost like dog bigotry when you think about the mental process and the labeling that goes on to keep these regulations in place. And it's these breed specific legislations that really hurt the shelter operations and prevent people from getting these dogs out of the shelters and adopting them and whatnot. So it's a tough problem that these dogs and the breeds face. And I don't really think it'll get any better without a lot of education and a lot of work to kind of rehabilitate the image of these breeds in the public's eye. And the damage is done more so through the media than anything else. The way that it's reported. Every dog breed bites people, but when a Chihuahua bites someone, it usually doesn't end up on the nightly news.
No.
So
No.
ask any veterinarian what the most violent breed of dog is. I think Chihuahua is going to rank at the top. So,
Rank pretty low down, yeah.
yeah.
Why do you think it sticks around? Why do you think the PR of pit bulls actually sticks and gets anywhere? Is it just it's something that somebody heard and they've had nothing that's kind of contradictory in a way? Like it starts off a particular way and they've had no good PR, which means we just remember them as being violent dogs.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't have any experience with the breed. I think of our own story, my own story with Kennel to Couch and Rocky, the dog that we had that inspired us to create it. Growing up, I didn't have any experience with pit bulls or pit bull breeds. My first dog was a German Shepherd, and then I had a husky. And when I was very young, I fell out of a tree, and these two pit bulls were off the leash, and they ran up to me, and they didn't do anything, but my dad came out screaming and acting like a maniac to get the dogs away. But the dogs were friendly, and it was just this fear-based reaction that I don't know why he did or didn't have, but it instilled that fear in me, because my dad was scared, now I'm scared. And I didn't really have any other point of reference to change my mind about it. And then back in 2014, someone dumped a dog on a road close to where we were living, and the dog was running around our wooded area for a couple weeks. And then one night I'm at a friend's house and I get a phone call from my fiance, and she says, "Hey, we found a dog." I'm like, "What do you mean you found a dog?" this dog, this pit bull, was running around our woods for a couple of weeks. We lured him into our car with goldfish crackers. I said, "What are you talking about? What do you mean you lured a pit bull into your car with crackers?" "Oh, he's so friendly. He's tied to the tree at our house, so you'll see him when you come home." So I drive home and it's nighttime, and I take a lawn chair and I sit it in the yard, and I see these two glowing eyes open in the darkness and start walking towards me. And this dog walked up, crawled into my lap, and this is not a small dog, right? It crawls into my lap and curls into the smallest ball and just goes to sleep. And I just kind of melted my heart. And I said, "Well, I guess you're staying," right? And I had 3 other dogs at
Yeah.
the time. So we took him inside to make sure he would get along. And it was like a ready-made family. The second he walked into the house, everybody got along. It was amazing. And over the next 4 years, he completely tore down every stereotype that you would think of about pit bulls or pit bull breeds with regards to. I've never had a dog that loved harder and was more in tune with his people. He found my fiance had thyroid cancer, which the dog actually found. The dog was always at her neck, kind of punching at it with his nose, going at it. And when things started going wrong, she went and told doctors what was happening, and they found it and were able to treat it. And Rocky really, I think he really changed the hearts and minds of almost everyone he met with regards to just how hard he loved. You couldn't interact with the dog and not love him. And so any kind of negative stereotype you would have about the pit bull breeds, when you met Rocky, you were like, "I don't know what people are talking about. This is the sweetest dog," right? And so that kind of helped change my mind. And then in 2018, we let him out one night, completely normal dog. And when he came back in, he was really tired and lethargic and having a lot of trouble. And we just couldn't understand what happened out there when he just went to go to the bathroom. And it turns out he had something called IMHA, which is immunomediated hemocratic anemia, which is basically his blood cells attacking each other, and they don't really know what triggers it, and it comes on. And 2 weeks later, he passed. It's got like almost, I believe, 100% mortality rate, and there's really just nothing you can do. And it was really devastating to myself and my family. He was young; he was only about 5 years old, so it was soul crushing. And at that time, as I was trying to deal with the grief and figure out how to handle this, because this was also kind of like my therapy dog for me. So I was on Facebook a lot and social media, and I saw all these posts for dogs that had been in the shelter for 1, 2, 3 years. And up to this point, I had no experience with nonprofit work. I had no experience with dogs really, other than owning them as part of the family. I'd never volunteered at shelters or had any idea. I just knew I loved dogs, and I knew I had a lot of pain, but I also knew that I didn't want the experience that I had with Rocky and to be wasted. The impact that he had on changing our hearts and minds about the breed and making us basically fall in love with them. I wanted to make sure that somehow his work with us and other people carried on. So I'm on social media, and I see these posts for dogs that have just been in the shelter for years, and they're almost 100% pit bulls. I don't think I saw any of these posts for dogs that weren't pit bulls. And I started really thinking hard about a shelter's business operations. I think I came to this nonprofit world with a very different approach. I think there's a lot of people who are passionate about a thing, but don't have a lot of experience with business operations, how to scale organizations, leadership. Even the business administrivia can be overwhelming when it comes to creating and running some of these organizations. And this is actually somewhere I do have a lot of experience. So from the defense industry, which is my day job, and this was my passion project. So I started thinking a lot about a shelter's business operations. And when I got out of the Army, I had a stint as a chef. I went to Johnson & Wales and became a chef for a while. And I started drawing a lot of parallels between the restaurant industry, or how a restaurant runs, and a shelter with regards to the percentage of revenue generating real estate that a restaurant has. So every table in a restaurant is a percentage of real estate, and you have to turn that table over several times in a night to be profitable and generate revenue. And a shelter's kennels are the same way. So if you have somebody that sits at a table all night, that table doesn't make any money. And similarly, if you have a dog that sits in a kennel, which is a percentage of that shelter's real estate, for a year, the shelter doesn't generate any revenue out of that kennel, that percentage of real estate. If a dog's there for 3 years, just think about the impact that has on the revenue generation, but also how many other dogs might have been able to be helped or come through that percentage of real estate if that dog wasn't basically locking down that percentage of real estate. So that's kind of how I started thinking about the problem. And the reason I started drawing these parallels is I didn't have a lot of resources to help or do anything.
Right.
And I wanted to know, is there a way to make a macro impact on the business operations of a shelter if I had micro resources? And so I thought, well, maybe if I could get that one dog adopted, the dog that's been there for 3 years, and kind of unlock that percentage of revenue generating real estate, that could have a significant impact. And, obviously we're not going to stop at one dog, but we're only doing one dog at a time just because of resources. So this is how I started thinking about it with regards to how the original program for Kennel to Couch would start. I wanted to partner with a shelter, identify the dog that had been there longest, and I wanted to hyper focus just on that one dog. And so I got with some local business partners, and we kind of put together this, at the time, I would say, makeshift incentive package with just random things to give to someone if they adopted the dog that we sponsored. And I went to the local shelter, the Harford County Humane Society, and they had a dog there named Ace that had been there 1.5 years. And I said, hey, this is my idea. I want to sponsor this dog. I'm going to give you some marketing material to let people know that the dog's sponsored. And if somebody adopts it, they get this incentive package. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a hyper-focused, basically a marketing campaign on social media just for this dog. A shelter has to promote all their dogs. I wanted to hyper-focus on this one dog. And within 2 months, we had Ace adopted. And then we picked the next dog, got him adopted, the next dog, got him adopted. Within 1 year, we had all of the long-term residents of the Harford County Humane Society adopted. So we're talking about, 4 dogs, 5 dogs that we got adopted. It doesn't seem like a big number, but it represented 8-9 years of shelter life. So the impact that had on the shelter's ability to start churning more dogs through those kennels, had a huge impact on their operations, and we still work with them today. And that's kind of how we started. And 4 years later, 5 years later, we're in 4 states, 5 shelters, and we're still expanding. Our goal is to get to all 50 states, and we focus on one dog at a time at each shelter, and one shelter in each state until we can kind of collect them all and fill in the different states. And since we've started, we've added a couple more programs. We have a pretty robust education component to our website, resource library and training videos and things like that. We've invested heavily in putting these resources on our site and building that out. And then we have a program that centers around events that get people out and active with their dog. So part of the re-education of the public is giving the public an opportunity to interact with these dogs. And so we host these walks on Facebook a couple times a year where people sign up for a Facebook group that they certainly raise a lot of funds for us also. And they walk 1 mile a day for 30 days with their dog. We have kennel to couch bandanas and things like that. And it gets people out with their dog in public, and it gives the public a chance to see these dogs not acting crazy, being good breed ambassadors. But the byproduct of that also is it's just a very healthy activity for people. It's very healthy for your dog. And there's this concept of play together, stay together. You know, the chances of you surrendering your dog to a shelter reduces dramatically if you're engaged in a lot of activities with your dog and you spend a lot of time doing these things. So there's a lot of byproducts of this walk other than just breed ambassadorship. So we have 3 programs now, and we're always looking for ways to add more and expand. And you know, obviously there's always a resource constraint to these things, but yeah, that's kind of how we started and where we're at now.
I'd be really curious about what goes on at the kennels. And my assumption, anyway, Tom, is that you've almost got to prepare the dog for house life. If your focus is on the long-term residence, I mean, this is all in my head, but they may get used to being in a kennel if they've been there for 1 year, 2 years, however long it is. Is there any sense of like maybe training them, rehabilitating them in a way, getting them used to
It's definitely
being in the
not in your
home?
head. That's a real thing. One of the downsides of shelters is it's probably the worst environment for a dog to be displayed so that families want to adopt them. It's very stressful. It's very
Mm.
loud. I mean, it's really no different environment than prison for dogs. If you think about it, it's just a cold concrete floor with hopefully a bed or a blanket and a very confined space. And all the dogs are barking and the anxiety and stress is high. You know, we have a lot of dogs that, especially the dogs that we focus on, the dogs that have been in the shelter longest, it has a real psychological impact on the dogs. And the longer they're there, they become almost institutionalized and they don't present well. So when you walk by the kennels and you're looking at the dogs saying, who should we take home? There's this dog acting like a maniac because he's been there for so long and it's so stressful. When you get the dog out of that environment, they're as sweet as can be. They're quiet. They're loving. And so you're right. There is a psychological impact that the longer they're there, the harder it is to reverse some of the behaviors they learn. So I think one of the most important things for people to do when they adopt any dog is truly understand how the decompression period works for a dog afterwards, how long it takes a dog to one, just calm down, absorb its new environment, learn to trust its new environment, trust its new owners. There's a very long decompression process. And I don't think that you jump into training right away. You have to let the dog calm down a bit. And you really shouldn't expose your dog to any people or things for a couple of weeks after you adopt them. To just give them an opportunity to settle into the environment, and then slowly introducing family and this and that. And definitely you don't want to just have people come over and start petting your new dog. And you have the decompression period is for the dog for sure, but it's also for you to learn about what triggers or what doesn't trigger your dog. How does the dog act around food? How does the dog act around people when it's getting food? Does the dog like to be touched on its rear end, you know, and scratched behind its ears, or maybe it doesn't? There's a very deliberate process that you should go through to just kind of orient yourself to your new dog and give that dog time to get used to you and its new environment. And then you start slowly introducing things. After the decompression period, then you can start socializing your dog deliberately and slowly with other dogs and things of that nature. So that's true for any dog of any breed. It has nothing to do with pit bulls, but it's certainly a good point about the impact that shelters have on their psyche.
I imagine there's some tells, and it's probably different from dog to dog, which is why it's so complicated. And you probably can't give any direct advice for people. But are there any like safe behaviors, for want of a better word, where if they start behaving this way, maybe we can start introducing something different to give them a chance to then get used to that again. Almost like the dogs have tells that you can pick up on that make you think, okay, we're ready to do something new now.
Well, one thing about dogs in general, but specific to dogs as an animal is I believe their ability to communicate with you. You know, they're the one animal that really has thousands of years of breeding into them, that they're domesticated and meant to interact with people, and they really understand how to tell you what they like and don't like. You know, certainly growling, their posture, if the hair stands up on their back, they're all of these things are just their ways of communicating with you. I recommend to anyone, if they can, to get help from a professional trainer to help understand your dog's cues. I mean, unless you're very in tune and have a lot of experience with dogs. Most people don't have a lot of quote unquote experience with dogs. Their experience is, yeah, we had a dog growing up, and that doesn't mean you know anything about dogs, right?
Yeah.
You know, so you know, we had a car growing up. I'm not a mechanic, right? So
That's actually a good analogy. That's a good way
yeah,
of putting it.
there's lots of things that we are familiar with but have no expertise with.
Yeah.
So it's like operator versus technician. Like, we know how to operate things. We know how to feed our dog. It doesn't make us a veterinarian, right? So get professional help to really understand your dog's cues, your behaviors, and the professional help, I'd say, is most important when you decide that you want to start socializing your dogs with other dogs, because it's not just about understanding your dog, it's about understanding all the other dogs tells at the dog park, or this or that. So socialization can be a very slow, deliberate process, and certainly having a trainer help you with that is recommended. I know everybody may or may not have those resources, but it's the safest way to go, and it can save you on a lot of veterinary bills. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's another thing about owning a dog, that or any pet for that matter, that people don't really appreciate until something happens. Vet bills are wildly expensive.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
just had emergency surgery on one of our dogs this weekend, and the bill was $18,000 and he was in the hospital for a couple of days.
Wow.
And my recommendation to anyone who gets a dog or a cat or a pet, if you can, is please look into pet insurance. It does cost a little bit each month, but I promise you that when you need to use it, the last thing that you want to have to do is make a life or death decision on your best friend based on the finances of the situation. It can be a crippling experience, and that's a kind of a component of what happened with Rocky. You know, we didn't have pet insurance. It wouldn't have mattered given the nature of what he had and the mortality rate. But a lot of the things they wanted to try, they're like, oh, we can try this, we can try that. It'll be about $20,000. And you're like, wait, we just can't do that, you know? And
Yeah.
having to
Yeah.
say we just can't do that, it can add so much pain to the experience that's already so hard. So pet insurance. You know, it's just, it may seem like a lot, but normally you can probably pay your deductible just through the course of your annual medical bills that you file claims for. So when the time comes that you need to use it, I promise you, any trip to the vet for anything starts at $1,000. Right? It doesn't even really matter what it is.
Yeah.
Because when you get into stitches or anything, the anesthesia is hundreds of dollars before you even start them. Like, there's so many factors that go into the cost. I certainly recommend it, and it can give you a real peace of mind that when the time comes that there's something maybe a little more catastrophic, that you have the resources to do these things. We had a cat or we have a cat. That's the best way to put it. We have a cat that had an issue, I think 2 years ago, where he just decided to go on a hunger strike for like 3 or 4 months out of nowhere. And we didn't know what was wrong. We went here, we went there. The doctors didn't know. They said just put him to sleep. He had a feeding tube in his neck, and the doctors were saying, if he doesn't start eating in a week, you might want to consider euthanasia. And we ended up taking him to the University of Pennsylvania, which is probably got one of the top veterinary hospitals in the world, in my opinion. And I said, he's insured. Let's just take him there and see what they say. And they said, of course he can live with a feeding tube. Of course he can do that. What are you talking about? And they took great care of him. And that's a true veterinary hospital, not an ER. People should know the difference between that too. There's your local vets and there's the ERs, but those aren't hospitals, right? Those are emergency care centers, basically. There are veterinary hospitals out there like UPenn, where it's no different than a hospital for humans, where they have an internal medicine section, they have neurology, they have all these teams of experts that can kind of come together. They have all the equipment there. When you go to the ER, it's like your dog needs an ultrasound, but you got to come back on Tuesday because our ultrasound guy is only here on Tuesday. If you take them to a veterinary hospital, all of those resources they can bring to bear immediately, just as if you went to the hospital for an emergency. And so we took him there, and 2 years later, he's with us, and it's like nothing ever happened. He started eating again. The feeding tube came out, and if we didn't have, but that was $12,000, right?
Wow.
But I think it cost us $1,200 was what our responsibility was out of that. So being able to go up into the hospital and say, do whatever needs to be done, it's covered, is a huge peace of mind when you're a pet owner and you run into these life or death situations. I think more often than not with animals, finances play the largest role in the decisions that we make on their health. And we would never make those decisions about people. Most people hopefully are insured and have some sort of coverage. If not, a hospital is still obligated to provide you life-saving care. Whereas for an animal, if you can't afford it, they're not performing any procedures. So, I think that's just a really big tip that I preach to everyone, that if they can, please, remove that part of the decision-making process from your life and give yourself that peace of mind. It's been huge for us personally. We've used it several times.
I guess that's what you're paying for as well, aren't you? You're paying for the peace of mind, not just the medical care side of things. You're also paying for the ability to, as you say, walk into a hospital and say, it's all covered. Don't worry about it. Just do
Absolutely.
whatever you need to do.
Absolutely. The diagnostics on a medical situation itself, before you even get to a treatment, can run thousands of dollars. The dog that I just took to the hospital, it's like, we need to do an MRI, we need to do a CT scan, we need to do an ultrasound. These are, some of these tests are a couple thousand, and just to figure out what's going on before you even start treating it. So, you definitely, but you won't get to the root of the problem if you don't have these things. And the surgery that my dog just had was not even for what we took him in for. It was this life-saving surgery to remove something that they found during the course of the diagnostics for these other things. So yeah, certainly being able to say, do whatever needs to be done is a great feeling in an otherwise really hard time when you're dealing with, the anxiety of the possibility of losing your pet.
Yeah, I imagine there's quite a strange situation for potential dog owners or people that want to take a kennel pet with them. Is this kind of decompression process, as you mentioned, it's almost like once you get out, what's the survival rate? Do they end up back in kennels? What's the situation? And it can be tough for a dog owner to be able to really know what that's like. As you said,
Mhm.
sometimes decompression can take forever. Maybe they never truly unlearn the kennel behavior in inverted commas because they've been so used to it. They're so used, they don't know how to respond to other dogs or people or places. Everything's new and their head just doesn't really know how to act or behave, and maybe it's too busy trying to protect itself, trying to protect you as the owner, or well, probably don't think that they own you just yet. It's so complicated that someone might not necessarily know how to take on the responsibility. Maybe they think it's going to be too hard for them to do it. Is there anything that you can think of that might help these people that they want to try to help? You know, they want to adopt one of these dogs and they want to give them a home and they want to look after them, play with them, make them a big part of the family. I think some people may need a bit of extra help on this front in terms of okay, when we take it home, what is it going to be like? Because as a dog owner myself, it's confusing when you've had them from a young age as well, because they don't know what's happening, you don't know what's happening. We're all just figuring it out together, and you're hoping that even when bad things happen, they're not that bad. You know, the consequences aren't exactly dire in some cases, especially when they're tiny and they try and bite you, but they can't because they're too small to really hurt you at all. It's like watching animals play fight, knowing full well that they can't hurt each other because they're too small. You know, they're not exactly dangerous beasts when they're less than 6 months old. So it's a different story all the time, and they're growing so quick. And by the time they're two, they're these huge animals, and you think you only had them 2 years ago. Where did this animal come from? And it's so fascinating, and yet it happens so quickly. It's almost like when you're a teenager, everything's changing so fast, everything's growing so
Sure.
fast. You've no idea what's happening, but it's like that for life with a dog, really, because they grow so quick. What can you tell people that want to own pets that'll help them with this? Because some people are listening to me thinking, blimey, I don't want to go through that. But I try and help people, try and help them think, okay, a dog is a good idea. A kennel dog is a good idea. How would you help them?
I encourage everyone to adopt from shelters and don't go to breeders. But anyone who adopts any dog should go into it understanding that a dog is like adopting a 5-year-old child, right? Um, and I say that from a dog's intelligence level also. I mean, you're basically dealing with a toddler, or I don't know what the age of toddler is, but you're dealing with like a 3 to 5 year old that can't communicate with you verbally. So they grow up quick, like you said, just like a 3 to 5 year old grows up quick. But if you think about it in terms of adopting a 5-year-old, when you adopt a dog, all the things that come with adopting a 5-year-old person come with the dog. You have to feed it, you have to care for it, or you need to house it, you need to pay its medical bills, you need to send it to school, quote unquote. You should get training for the dog. You need to do all the same things. Sure, it's at a little bit lesser of a level, but all those components, all the responsibilities are still there. If you're going to make them part of the family. And just like being a new parent, being a new dog owner is a learning process. The difference is when you adopt some of these adult dogs, you have to understand that the way a dog acts, the way a dog behaves, just like people, like just like if you were to go out and adopt a child, you don't know what that child went through before you came into their life. You don't know what that dog went through before you came into life. That dog might have been kicked onto the street by a guy that beat it every day when the doorbell rang, right? And so now when the doorbell rings, the dog goes crazy. But you don't just return the dog. Like you have to take time to understand that a dog's behavior is a sum total of its life's experience, just like our behaviors, our actions, our decisions that we make are based on the sum total of our life experience up to that point. A dog's no different. You have to take some time to unpack what those experiences were. That's why the decompression period is so important. You're learning, how does the dog react to doorbells are a great example, or the doorbell on TV and the dog goes crazy, running to the door. Right? You have to kind of go through this learning process. I encourage people, like I said, get help, get a trainer if you can. If you can't get a trainer, one of the things we do at Kennel to Couch if you go on our website, you'll see the what we call the Pibble package, and it's basically just a box of resources now that we send home with anybody that adopts one of the dogs that we sponsor. And there's some things in there like a coupon for a Freedom No Pull harness from one of our partners, which is like a really good harness for strong bully breeds. It stops them from pulling as much. It helps you manage them. There's a thing that's like a licky mat where you spread peanut butter on it and they lick it. But that's really about mental stimulation. These are good things to kind of keep the dog engaged. But we also send home 4 books in our box that cover topics like love has no age limit, how to deal with senior dogs, or play together, stay together, which is the importance between the importance of physical activity and the bond that it creates with you and your dog. These are some of the things that you do, and there's a couple other topics like training the dog to go to the bathroom outside and this and that at any age. Education is always the key. You can't adopt a dog and just expect the dog to behave the way that you think it should without you doing anything. It takes work. It's a lot of work. And training is a lot of work and a lot of repetition. The good thing is dogs usually, I'd say most dogs, any breed, are very responsive to training. They're not dumb animals. They are smart. Just like a 5-year-old learns quickly. Think about how a 5-year-old absorbs the world and how quickly they pick up on things. And now it's talking, now it's saying words, now it's stringing words together. You're like, wow, it's so crazy to watch this living thing
Yeah.
kind of absorb everything around it and process it mentally. Well, dogs do that too. They're very smart animals, and they pick up on your mannerisms. They pick up on your energy. It's not about how a dog reacts to other people. How do you react to other people? The dog's going to react the same way. So much of a dog's behaviors in the home are cued into our behaviors and our energy. So understanding all of those things is key to making sure that you don't have to return your dog to the shelter because my dog's doing this. It's like, well, what are you doing to stop it? I mean, we are the ones that are responsible for our dog's behavior ultimately and legally, I should say. So understanding all of those things going into it is important. Now, that all sounds like a lot of work. I mean, it can be, but anybody who has owned dogs, I think, also understands the rewards from that. And I don't think there's a lot of things you can do that are more rewarding or make you feel like a dog will make you feel after you've given it a loving home and you've taken that dog out of a bad situation in the shelter and kind of turned that dog's life around. So the unconditional love that you can get from a dog, I think is almost unlike anything you can get from any other animal. So yeah, I mean, I certainly recommend it. I think it's important to understand what your responsibilities are. And when you take ownership of the responsibility and you take ownership of the understanding that it's your job to get that dog, I think that will help a lot of people, weather the storm of the dog having some accidents inside or this or that. You've accepted that this is going to be part of the process. So, and dogs learn quickly. We're not talking about it takes 3 years to train a dog to go to the bathroom outside. They catch on very quickly, but repetition is key. Consistency is key to training any dog to do anything. So, yeah, I mean, there's responsibility like anything else, but the rewards are there. And any dog owner, everybody thinks they have the best dog, right? My dog's the best, and everyone is right. So because that's how their dog makes them feel. So those are the rewards. They're great.
It's definitely worth noting that a lot of the dog doing things comes down to how you, as the human, initiated or started that behavior to happen. So we can say, like, they go in the toilet inside all the time. It's like, okay, well, do you have anything consistently makes them think that they're going in the toilet outside? So
Right.
we have something that we tend to use, although sometimes like the dog that we have, she also relates it to just going outside. So it's
Mhm.
not necessarily just going to the toilet, it's going outside. So she'll go and there's less mess inside now, which is fantastic. But she doesn't necessarily register that if she needs to go to the toilet, she can let us know by, wanting to go outside. She'll
Mhm.
go outside to do anything like play, run around, have a laugh with the kids, that sort of thing. So
Sure.
it's not too focused at the moment. And I don't think it should be in a way because you want her to enjoy going outside. You don't want it to go, oh, here we go, toilet outside, here we go again. So I think it's that understanding that it does come with a lot of confusion and maybe it's a lesser of two evils that you've just got to deal with, that sort of thing. I don't want the dog that we have to sort of go, oh, toilet, gotta go outside. I want them to enjoy going outside and then not having any mess inside is a byproduct of her enjoying her time outside. So it's a weird a massive balancing act of the different responsibilities and how to get what you would like while they get what they would like. And most relationships are like that, though. And I think sometimes it's easy to forget that while a dog isn't a person, they have some traits of people. They have some things that humans would have. And it's definitely a learning curve of trying to process how they communicate and learn about them makes it easier. That's one
Mhm.
thing I found. The more you can learn about them, the easier it is because you'll know when they do this, that's what it means. When they do that, that's what it means. And I found that it's a bit more straightforward with a dog. It's very like if you try to learn about people, they'll change on you straight away, or they'll have three different things that all mean the same thing. A bit like language in a way. You've got a
And
word
there's
that you
really no
use.
deception with dogs. Yeah, they
Yeah.
they say what they mean, right?
Yeah,
When
definitely.
they're telling you something, that's what it means. Uh, so, and every dog's different, and every dog communicates different. So you have to spend a lot of time just learning your dog's mannerisms and their cues. But once you learn them, it becomes second nature. It's not an act. Once you learn your dog's cues, it's not something you have to think about anymore. You will know, and you
That's
don't
it.
really
Yeah.
have to spend a lot of time saying, "Is my dog lying to me?" Is it does it really mean what I think it means? No, they don't. Like it just becomes a natural communication, and there's no deception, and you just So it is a learning curve, but once you're there, you're there.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily change all that much either. If it does change, it's more gradual and you tend to pick up on it much faster than they change. So as they grow and change and adapt, you're able to easily keep up
Sure.
with it as the dog matures, as you mature, you just get used to being around each other. It makes everything easier.
And a
Everything
lot
so
of
much
times when a
easier.
dog's behavior changes rapidly, that's telling you something also that maybe there's something wrong. You know, if a dog doesn't want to go outside anymore, or if a dog's not hungry anymore, but he's usually a chow hound, like all of these things are cues for something else. I'm not feeling well or something of that nature. And that's when the pet insurance comes in, unfortunately. So
Definitely, yeah. I think being able to get pet insurance and health insurance for pets and dogs and pit bulls specifically is definitely going to be like a long-term investment. It's always going to benefit. It's always going to help you when, as you
for
say,
sure.
if bills can be in the tens of thousands and yet you pay maybe, I don't know, upwards of 50, 100, $200 or pounds a month, it's still worth it because when the bill comes around, you're going to be hoping that it covers it because it's
Yeah,
going to
I
be
mean, I'll
so
give you an
much more than what
example.
you're
I think I
paying.
pay $50 a month, and my coverage is for up to $30,000, which for vet bills that'll cover most things. You're talking about like chemotherapy and stuff. You're covered. Uh, and my deductible is $1,000 for the year, and then I'm responsible for 10% of the bills. So normally that $1,000 deductible is not something that I spend out of pocket when there's an emergency. Normally that's covered through like little things throughout the year. I have a dog that has medication for skin issues. So every time we fill a prescription, that chips away at that deductible a little bit, things of that nature. So by the time it comes for a trip to the ER or things like that, the deductible is already met. And so I'm only responsible for 10% of the bill. And one other tip I wanted to give about insurance, I think this is hugely important because I just experienced this myself. Go get the insurance the day you get your dog, because unlike people, pet insurance does preclude pre-existing conditions. So if you wait, if you've had your dog for a couple of years and it's been going to the vet for a couple of years and there's 2 years worth of medical records, and then you go to get insurance, they will look at all of those records to see what they're not going to cover going forward because the dog had those conditions before you got the insurance. Get the pet insurance day one. And I say that the dog that we just had emergency surgery on, a couple of years ago, they found a mass in his intestine that was, it seemed very benign. And we tracked it over the years, and it just was there, but it wasn't doing anything. This time around, when we took him to the hospital, we actually took him there because he was having trouble with his back legs and walking. He was slipping on the floor and things of that nature. And we did get him insured. But when we got the insurance, they said, you know, he's got this mass that we've identified. So your dog's insured and he's covered, but except for whatever this mass is. And because we don't know what the mass is, you know, we can't cover him for anything that's cancer or like tumor or mass related. That's all kind of considered. And they said, you know, if you got a biopsy and you identified what that mass was, we can narrow the pre-existing condition down to that specific thing. But without that biopsy, and it was in a very complicated spot, so it would have been very hard to, it would have been a big procedure to try to get this biopsy. We didn't want to put him through it if it wasn't bothering him. So fast forward, now we go to get his back and his legs looked at, and they were doing the diagnostics, and they did identify some disc damage and spina something. He's got an infection in his spinal cord that was really affecting him. But during the course of that, they determined that the mass had become necrotic and was a imminent threat to perforate, which would have caused a lot of internal damage. So this turned into an emergency surgery to remove the mass, and that part wasn't covered. So, you know, this $18,000 that we spent, a significant portion of it won't be covered because it was a pre-existing condition. All the rest of the stuff, the neurological things, the spinal cord infection, all of that's covered. But still, this one thing. Now, that's all to say, if I would have just gotten the insurance the day I would have gotten them, everything would have been covered because it wasn't identified. So if you're going to get a dog, get insurance right away before you start identifying and all these things go on their medical records, and then they won't be covered. I think that's just a huge factor in whether your insurance will be valuable to you. Right.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And with dogs, there's a certain age, and I don't really know what it is, but at a certain age, insurance won't cover them anymore because they're too old. So, and they know that some stuff is going to start going wrong. You know, everything's a pre-existing condition at that point. So,
yeah,
you know, that's the big tip. Do it early, as young as possible, and down the road, you know, if that $50 a month is nothing when it saves you $20,000, you know, when there's a procedure to be done.
Yeah, definitely. Tom, it's been great to have you as a guest on the show. I appreciate you taking the time. If people wanted to get involved with Kennel to Couch, how can people do that? So it could be website, social media. How can people get involved?
Sure. So first, I just encourage everyone to visit our website, which is kennel2couch.org. And that's TO, not the number 2. So kennel, TO, couch.org. We have a lot of great resources on there. You can see all the shelters we're partnered with. You can see all the dogs we're currently sponsoring and the information on how to find them at their partner shelters. We have a great resource library. We have a great blog, which puts out information all the time, not just on breed education, but just general information that I think any dog owner would be interested in. We're pretty active with that. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We're on all the channels you can find Kennel to Couch, and we have a pretty large following on social media. We have a little over 100,000 followers on Facebook and growing. We have a couple things coming up very, very soon. And believe on the 24th, we're going to launch a campaign to promote the Kennel to Couch t-shirts once again. We haven't done a run of shirts in about 4 years. Our t-shirts are a great program. We've partnered with a company called Nine Line Apparel, which is a veteran-owned company here in the U.S. They do a lot of stuff in the veteran community. So if you want to support veterans and veteran-owned businesses, but also want to help save some dogs, I encourage everyone to be on the lookout when we launch our t-shirt sales, and they're really cool shirts. We also have our Bourbon for Bullies raffle coming up that's going to be launching here today, or I think it already launched on the website. We've partnered with a company called Raffleworthy, and we've put together a line of some of the rarest bourbons that you can find, a full vertical of Pappy Van Winkle and the Buffalo Trace Antique Series. So we're talking about $30,000 worth of bourbon for these 9 bottles. We'll be raffling those off, and there's some other prizes that go along with it. But the last time we did one of these, it was very successful, and they raised a lot of money for us. And they've been an absolute great partner. So that is launching any day now. So be on the lookout to get your tickets for the bourbon raffle. I believe in August we'll have our next walk, the big walking event that we do. Last year we had over 100,000 people walk a mile a day for a month to support this. So I mean, they're big events. We did a couple walks. I think one of the walks alone had 60,000 people participate. So those are really cool events. I think we're looking to do that again in August. Other than that, we're raising money throughout the year, and I wish we had a little more time. Kennel to Couch is really operating differently than any other nonprofit that I've run across. We're almost an entirely digitally run organization, which allows us to scale quite easily. And we've decided that the way that we're going to scale our operations is through our endowment that we created. So if you go on our website, there's a tab for the Forever Fund. And basically what we want to do is we want to make sure that when we add a shelter to our program, that it's funded in perpetuity. I don't want to live paycheck to paycheck, and I don't ever want to tell a shelter that, hey, you were part of our program this year, but we can't afford you next year. So as our endowment grows and our ability to basically live off the interest that's produced out of our endowment expands, we know that revenue is expanded in perpetuity. So as that grows, we'll add shelters to our program. And all of these big fundraisers we do, we put the funds in the endowment to expand that way. So it's a slower growth process, but it ensures that we're funded forever. Yeah, so the Forever Fund. And if you go onto the website and take a look at that, you can also take a look at basically what our roadmap is for expansion. What are we going to do with that money? So all of that's laid out there. So if you want to get involved, certainly take part in one of these programs that we have, or hit the donate button, and just educate yourself and your friends and the public on the misconceptions about the breed, and just strive to be a good dog owner and all of the responsibilities and joys that come with that, and adopt and don't shop. Yeah, that's the big motto. Please adopt. There's, I think, over 1 million pit bulls put down every year alone, just in that breed, or euthanized just in the United States, because of just overcrowding and overbreeding. So, one of the kind of thoughts behind Kennel to Couch is we don't need more shelters. We need to get dogs out of the shelters. So, we're really focused on getting those dogs out, not putting more dogs back in. And go adopt a dog and enjoy.
Thanks so much for being a guest on the show. Those that are listening, feel free to subscribe, share the show, tell others, and also leave a review wherever you are listening into your podcasts. Tom, it's been great to have you on. I appreciate it, and I look forward to keeping in touch. Thank you.
Mike, thanks so much for having us and giving us a platform to talk.